us. I know that life is really crazy right now and that we're all just doing our best. So that's sort of the first thing that I wanted to sort of put out there is that I'm going to be sharing some suggestions for ways that you might think about parenting during coronavirus, during the pandemic differently. But the idea here is not that any of us are going to be perfect parents, perfect employees, perfect caregivers. So let's just take that idea of perfection off the table and focus instead on how we can use the ideas and the principles of leadership to be more effective in all parts of our life. So a little background about me. I am an associate professor in management. My background is in organizational psychology. So my PhD is in the psychology of people at work, things like motivation, leadership, teamwork, decision-making, organizational culture, all of that stuff. And my specific focus for the last almost 20 years has been on work-life integration, how people manage the different parts of their life, whether it's school or work or community, or how they take care of themselves, their parents, their kids. So I've been studying this as an academic for nearly 2 decades, as I said, but over the last few years, I've really made a transition to saying, how can that research that I've been doing actually help people and make a difference in their lives? And how can we translate this into something that specifically parents can use to feel better, do better, and raise the next generation of human beings? I think we all know that we're making a lot of sacrifices right now, and a lot of those are to protect the society that our children live in. So as we think about what we're doing, we'll keep the bigger picture in mind. As Roxanne said, here's the book. It's called Parents Who Lead. And we spent about 3 years working on the book overall, but one of those years was spent working closely with about 30 dual career couples with kids. And we took them through this program that you're going to hear about some of the principles of. And of course, as we worked with them, that program was refined and changed, but we also learned from their stories about what works, what doesn't, what is particularly impactful. So I'm going to sort of share the highlights of the approach with you today and sort of the mindset shift that we ask parents to take, rather than saying, this is how you have to do it. And we don't have time to go into great detail. So the first thing I want to start out by asking you to think about is, what does it feel like to be a parent right now? And if you're in Zoom or if you're connected with Roxanne through any way, just what does it feel like? How do you feel? It feels scary, absolutely. Nervous, yep. It's unknown. We don't even know how long this is going to last. What else? They can't explain what it feels like. Yeah. Can't explain the world. It's hard to explain this to our kids, right? I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and we're trying to make sense of it and to help them make sense of it. We want our kids to feel like things are safe, right? And we want them to feel like they're safe. But the reality is that we don't know exactly what's going on, and we have to sort of fake it till we make it a little bit. So even before this whole pandemic, when we talked to parents, they said that they felt stuck, rushed, confused, out of control, isolated, distracted, overwhelmed. This is working parents under normal circumstances, right? So now add on this life and society altering situation, and we're really feeling all those things in addition to a fear for our physical and mental health and those of our children. So this is tough, right? Nobody has the answers. I'm trying to use the research that I've done over the last few years on parents to try and be helpful, but I'm figuring this out at the same time as everybody else. So just know that you're not alone, and that people are, parents just like you are struggling to figure this out on a day-by-day basis, and we're all works in progress, particularly now. So over the years, we've really looked at, can you hear my dryer? saying it's done. Over the years, we've really looked at how people can be more effective in managing the different parts of their lives. And I purposefully don't use the term balance, because balance sets up this idea that if you have more of one, you have to forsake something else. So if I want to be better in my career, then I have to sacrifice my sleep or sacrifice my health or sacrifice my time with my children, and vice versa. So we are thinking about, okay, if the idea of balance and trade-offs isn't that helpful, then what's another way of looking at this? And we know that there are trade-offs, right? That's reality. With time is finite. And although it feels a little bit less finite right now, it's like, it's just endless stretches of time. But how can we give you a new way of thinking about the different parts of your life in order to help you and to help me? And I've been doing this stuff in my own life. I've been researching it since before I even had kids. So this is very much, even though it's academic, it's also part of the way I parent and I live my own life. And what we found through the years of research is that when people start to see themselves as leaders, they open new paths to feeling less guilty. They open new paths to creative solutions, to more confidence, to greater connection. So the idea is starting to think of yourself as a parent and in all parts of your life as a leader. And the good news about that is that we know what good leaders do. This has been researched for decades and decades. There's ample evidence that the good leaders, the best leaders, know what they care about. They're able to communicate it. They get people on board with that idea, and they try new ways of achieving their goals. That's sort of textbook leadership 101. And what we found is that when we bring that to working parents or parents in general, that it can help them develop skills that make them more effective in all parts of life. And a little bit later, I can share some of the data on that. But the idea here is to recognize that leadership isn't something that you only possess if you're in a formal leadership role at work, right? Anybody can be a leader. It's about motivating people to do things that matter. So the first step is sort of becoming a leader. And when you take this notion of leadership into your life today, what are those essential skills that you need to have, right? So first of all, and feel free to text questions, email questions. I can see what's Roxanne's, she's sharing them with me, so feel free to ask. So what are the leadership skills that you can work on now that will be helpful now? And I'm going to give you some tools and some activities that will hopefully help those emerge. But this is, an ongoing process of thinking and reworking, et cetera. So 4 essential skills that I would love for you to focus on. First one is clarifying your guiding values. So what are the values that will bring you through this time, that you, in your ideal world, the values that you would live on a day-to-day basis? So if it's patience, if it's self-acceptance, if it's authenticity or sensitivity or empathy or care or attention to the community, thinking about what are those guiding values. Next skill is engaging with our children in meaningful ways, and I'll talk more about how we can creatively engage with our children in ways that mirror how the best leaders work with the people around them. How do we cultivate a community of caregiving and support? So how do we leverage that network of love and support around us in all the different parts of our lives? Even though we're socially distancing, there's ways to feel more support and feel more love and feel less alone. And then lastly, the 4th skill is experimenting, trying new ways to live and work and get things done, because there's really no this is uncharted territory for all of us. We've never been through this before. So the idea is to ramp up really quickly, getting good at trying something, see if it works, iterating. If it doesn't work, try something new, throw it out altogether, or just tweak it a little bit, and to constantly be really good at trying those new things. So that first skill that I mentioned is identifying your values. So another opportunity here to text or type or email in, what are those values? I mentioned a few: caring for those in need, uh, having fun, working together, being authentic. What are some of the values for you that you would love to have at the center of your sort of experience that you'll reflect back on? So feeling secure, building self-confidence, I see. Um, any other thoughts? I know for me, I really still want to have fun, try to have fun as much as possible. Love. I honed in on this word solidarity for me as sort of this sense of community, like we're all in this together, that I really want to keep in mind. Yeah, encouraging your daughter to try new things, feel like it's okay to be failure, or to make mistakes. So something like, not being perfectionistic, being kind, being honest, kindness to ourselves, self-compassion, right, is a really useful value to keep at the forefront. Self-love. So all of these values, if you can narrow it down, oh, I love family, team spirit. If you can narrow it down to just like 4 or 5 values that you would like to keep in mind, and have the people in your life, to the extent possible, share what theirs are. And if you could even come up with a few shared values that you want to guide you as a family, that can be really useful, because we're going to get caught up in the news. We're going to get caught up in the stress of being up in each other's business all day. So having those written down, where you as a family have acknowledged that those are the values that matter to you, um, will allow you to take a step back from the craziness and say, okay, where as a leader do I want to direct my attention? Do I want to direct my time and energy? So write a list. And this works with even pretty young kids. So when my kids were really little, basically once they could talk, we came up with kindness, fairness, fun as our sort of family values that we were going to focus on. And fairness to a 2-year-old means something really different than fairness to a 10-year-old. So as my kids are growing, we're changing what that means, right? Does fairness mean everybody gets exactly the same? Does everybody gets what they need? So it can be pretty straightforward, just a few words. And then as you're parenting and as you're talking with your children, you can go back to those values. I had our friends, our neighbors walked by our backyard today, and the kids wanted to smush up against the fence and talk to each other with like 2 inches of social distance. And, it's one thing to tell them to stand apart, and it's another thing to say, we're standing apart because we care about our community. We care about not spreading this to our neighbors who are maybe more sick than us or more vulnerable. So even just the small ways that you can embed those values in your daily life, I think it gives people a sense of calm and peace. And then for a teenager, you could even say, go Google list of values. And if you do that, you can find a list with like 500 values on it. And I make my undergraduate students do this too. And I ask them to pick and rank their top 10 with explanations. And surprisingly, they get a lot out of it. It seems like it should be obvious, like we should already know what our values are. And maybe some of us do, but putting it to words, putting pen to paper, can be really powerful, especially when you do it as a collective, not as an individual. So then another way that you can start to think about these values is to think about, what would your day look like if you were living those values right now? Now, it's okay to have a pie in the sky, picture perfect dream of what it would look like to live your values on a daily basis, and to not achieve that. The goal here is not to set that perfect day and then go for it. The goal here is to think about, how would I incorporate my values into my day-to-day life, right? So if I value self-love, what would that look like on a daily basis tomorrow? How would I show self-love? How would I cultivate it? And it might mean taking a nap. It might mean letting yourself watch TV when you're just overwhelmed, or letting your kids watch TV when you're overwhelmed. It could mean exercising or meditating, right? Getting a vision of how that self-love would look in the context of the other responsibilities in your life is going to sort of start the creativity going about how can we get through this in a new way. So, you know, tomorrow my kids start their online schools. So in an ideal world, they would be able to focus on their schoolwork for, I mean, fingers crossed, 3 hours, and I could get 3 hours of work done in the morning. That's my ideal, because they would be learning and I would be, you know, doing my work, which I value as well. So that doesn't mean that tomorrow when they start online school, magically the technology is going to cooperate and they're going to be able to work independently. But I understand that in an ideal scenario, I would be able to engage in both and to feel connected to my children and their education, as well as feeling connected to my job and feeling like there's a sense of importance that matters there as well. So I'm going to ask you to do an activity, and I can share the written out activity, but I'm going to ask you to take a minute, and if you have a piece of paper or notes on your phone, somehow to write stuff down. And we call this taking the four-way view. And the idea here is to think of your life in different buckets, different domains as we call them, and to start to see how they fit together. And so I'll give you an example. So let's say, and I see that somebody commented that we feel guilty when we put ourselves first, right? Totally get it, been there. Let's say if I have this belief that my career or my kids are going to suffer if I take time for myself, then I am giving my attention to other things and taking it away from myself. So that is a reality, right? We don't all have hours to meditate and exercise and do everything perfectly. But when we feel guilty about it, we prevent ourselves from doing that. What we're missing is this idea that if I invest in myself a little bit, that I could actually be more effective in my family domain because my stress is managed, I feel better, more effective in my work because I'm able to focus. I'm not just, you know, totally ridden with anxiety at all times. So it's hard, but part of this is actually changing how you spend your time and energy, and part of it is rearranging your thinking. So let's think about our lives in 4 general buckets. These buckets tend to apply to most people. If it doesn't apply to you, you can come up with your own buckets. There's no rules for this. But in general, we ask people to think about 4 domains. The first one's the career domains. This could be your work right now, but it could also be the career that you want to have in the future. It could be volunteerism. It could be the career you had in the past that you might get back to. Could be your career aspirations. Anything that falls in the realm of work is the career domain. And it doesn't have to be paid work. The next bucket is family. So that's children, partner, elder parents, extended family, pets, all of those different people in your family. Next bucket is community. This one's slightly harder for people to wrap their brains around because we don't think of ourselves as part of a community that often, or many of us don't. But thinking about our childcare providers, our neighbors, our friends, our community organizations, our religious organizations, our homeowners associations, our neighborhoods, our blocks. And then the last domain is self, mind, body, spirit. So the first thing I want you to do is, if you think about how important each of these domains are to you, I want you to divide up the importance into 100%. So if they were all equally important, you'd allocate 25% to career, 25% to family, 25% to community, and 25% to self. And the reason we put a limit on it is because most of us would just give 100% to everything if we weren't sort of forced to divide it up. So think about how important are these different aspects of your life to you, and try to come up with numbers, and you can always revisit this. And then the next thing I want you to think about is your attention. Where is your attention going throughout your waking hours? What percentage of it goes to career, to family, to community, and to self? So if you, for instance, have your kids in the room with you and you're playing with your kids, but really your attention and your mind is focused on the pandemic, the broader societal implications, then maybe your attention is really in the community space and not in the family space. Or you're exercising, but your mind is focused on all the things you have to do at work. So where is your attention? And the reason that we do this is because a lot of people assume that where they are physically is where their mind is. And we know, especially right now, when we're all sort of stuck in the same place with our children and our partners at all times, that our attention isn't always necessarily on the thing it's supposed to be on. And that's cool. But let's take stock of where is it? Right now, a lot of my attention has shifted from career to family because I have a career that isn't going to suffer too much if I take some attention away from now and put it in 2 months. I'm really fortunate in that way. And I know that not everybody here has that luxury, right? That's a privilege to be able to figure out how we allocate attention. A lot of us are just trying to keep our jobs or to find employment when things have shifted, or to, figure out how we're going to make ends meet. So there's no right or wrong answers here. And try to let go of the idea of saying, oh, I'm not allocating my attention in the 100% perfect way. I don't think any of us are. And then lastly, how satisfied are you in each of those 4 domains? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being everything's perfect, I love it, etc. 1 is everything's going horribly, I'm miserable. Now, I'm going to ask you to think about the present moment, which could be totally different from how satisfied you are in general, right? The moment we're experiencing right now, satisfaction could have plummeted. It could, potentially be really good in some area. I would say in some ways I feel more connected with my community and I feel like I'm doing something good for the community. So by socially distancing, so I feel more connected with my community. So I would say maybe my satisfaction went up there, but where are you right now? And then if you want to take it a step further, we have an activity that you can do if you have a parenting partner, not necessarily your spouse, but somebody that you see as a partner in parenting your children. Ask them to do it, the same exercise. How important is each domain? How much attention and how much satisfaction? And look at how you're both doing. Where is their compatibility? Where is their conflict, right? Where are their problems? And if you want to take it even another step further, think about before you read what your partner wrote, think about it how you would rate their importance, attention, and satisfaction. It's really enlightening, and a lot of couples that we work with were very surprised to see how their partner's perception of themselves differed from how they perceive their partner. So even just clarifying these and talking about them can be really powerful in terms of developing a shared understanding of how things are going. I think if your children were old enough, maybe teenagers, they actually might be able to do this as well. So I'm going to ask you another question, which is, how has this reality, that 4-way view that you just took, how is it different from your pre-coronavirus life? What do you notice about how you're managing the different parts of your life compared to how it was before? If you're always an anxious mess, feeling guilty between work and family, etc., and you still are, that's cool too, right? Not everything has to change. Somebody just wrote that we have more family time now, which is hard. Oh, which is nice. That's a good part, but it's hard because you can't go anywhere. So we're stuck with each other. We're not necessarily getting breaks. We're not necessarily getting out. There's a lot more worrying now, absolutely. So thinking about what creative opportunities may emerge to make things better, to try and have our attention allocated in a way that matches how important it is to us, and to be more satisfied. And there is no expectation that you are going to engage in a total upheaval of your life in order to make things better, right? The idea here isn't that you need to go from a 1 satisfaction to a 10, because I don't think too many of us are at a 10 in regular life. And I've worked with enough people to know that 10s are really, really rare. When we've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of parents rate their satisfaction across different domains, it doesn't, 10s not that common. 9s, plenty of 9s by the end of the multi-month process that we undertake with parents, but not 10s. So if you're just, in a 1-hour conversation here, if I could get you half a point, a quarter of a point happier, more satisfied, or less guilty, I think that would be a good step. So before we start thinking about how to make these changes, great leaders, the best leaders, know how to get people on board. So the first step might be talking about your values with your immediate family, and then thinking about how can we engage with our children more deeply, connect in a new way. And one of the best things that the parents we work with do or learn to do more of is ask questions of their children. What do you need? How can I help you? Now, if you're asking a 5-year-old, what do you need? They may say candy and iPads. And that doesn't mean you have to give it to them. But it's a launching point for a conversation about, well, here's what we value. We value having quality time together, or we value our health. So here's why we don't eat junk food all day, every day during quarantine, right? So start to ask your children, what matters most to you? How do you live your values? What can I do to be better? And then here's what I expect of you. Do you have any questions? Here, what do you expect of me? Clarify. Keep on asking, asking, asking. Now, not every child will be able to fully articulate exactly what they need in that moment. But even just having the conversations about that sort of thing may start to trigger people in your family to think about how we could meet each other's needs better, easier, in a more creative way, in a new way. So take some time, we've got lots of it. Take 10 minutes and 15 minutes to sit down with each child individually to think about and talk about, here's what we need from each other, here's what we care about, here's what we expect. Do we have it right? And the closer you can get to clarifying those assumptions, the stronger your relationship's going to be. And, I'm going to talk about this in the work domain as well. So now thinking about work, and I don't know whether everybody's working outside the home generally, currently, so I'm going to kind of try and keep this somewhat brief because I want this to be sort of generally effective. But the idea here is, if you think about what good leaders do, is they make it really clear what's expected. They make it clear where they want to go, what the future of the organization is going to look like, and how to get people on board. So same thing in your workplace. We're all in uncharted territory. So we're operating on assumptions that haven't really been tested. We're assuming this is what my boss wants me to do. This is what they expect of me. Here's what my colleagues need. Here's what my subordinates need. We have all of these assumptions that we're making on a daily basis. My boss assumes that I'm going to be as productive as I was a month ago, right? So we need to be leaders in proactively clarifying those expectations, and do that within a boundary of not getting in trouble at work. Obviously, we don't want people to get fired, right? So if your boss, sometimes we have to be a little fake at work, but try for some clarity, some authenticity, to the extent that it's feasible with your boss or your colleagues. We don't all have great bosses and great colleagues. So do the best you can and start to think about how you can share those values that you identified with other people. So for instance, in my work right now, I've shifted a lot of attention from my researchy side, my data collection, statistics, analysis side, to more public speaking, more, I created these workshops about coronavirus. And I checked with right now I'm in this presidential fellowship, so I report directly to the president of my university. And I checked and I said, is it okay that I'm doing this? Is this an acceptable use of my time and energy? Now, he could have said no, right? He could have said, we need you to keep doing exactly what you were doing before. To be fair, part of this shift is also in the idea of promoting my book. But part of this is, here are my values and it's important to me to live them. And I know that not everybody can do that. But being authentic, being realistic, being values focused and clarifying expectations, those are things that you can do. And if you feel like you can't bring your personal values to bear on the situation, one thing you can do is draw on the organizational values and say, here's our mission statement. Here's what we say that we value. Here's why this choice or this decision matters to me. And here's how it allows me to live our shared values versus just my individual values. But again, I know that we're all in different places with our jobs. And the idea here is that when you do this, it not only helps you feel better about your family life, but it helps you be a better employee. It helps you perform better because you're directing your time and energy where it matters. So if you have this assumption in your head that your boss needs every report filed perfectly, how can you explain to your boss that if you put that project aside for a few weeks because it's not urgent and you redirect your attention to something else, that will help them achieve their goals, right? So we want to frame it in a way that this isn't just for me and my family and my values. Here's how I'm going to make things better for you too by making this change. Whether it's, we'll get to changes that we could do in a minute. And then the next step is bringing in the outer circle. And I know that some of you are already feeling like you're connecting more to friends, extended family in creative ways. Childcare providers, teachers, community organizations. I started checking my school's Facebook group and my neighborhood Facebook group, which I haven't done for years, because I want to feel a sense of connectedness with my community. And I saw that, everybody in my neighborhood is putting teddy bears in the windows so kids can go on teddy bear hunts around the neighborhood when they do get out for walks. So I felt like I could be part of my community and live my values in that way. So think about those people that you could cultivate deeper and more supportive relationships with, not just what they can do for you, but also what can you do for them? Because we know that feeling like we're socially distancing and making these choices for others is a lot more sustainable than we're making this choice to keep ourselves safe. We feel more peaceful and more engaged and more good and better about ourselves when we reframe it as that community spirit and that solidarity. So the next thing that you can start to think about once you've connected with all these people, hopefully with a sense of shared values if possible, but if not, at least just here's what I assume, what do you assume, is to start thinking about creating small changes to make things better. And the trick here is to create these experiments to make things better in all parts of life. So if you want to take a 5-minute morning meditation and you believe that that's going to hurt your family, then maybe that's not the right experiment for you, right? Or if you want to try something and it's going to put a lot, like I would like to try not washing dishes tomorrow and my husband doing it, my spouse doing it, right? If that's my idea for an experiment, that makes a win for me. but it puts extra work on him. That may be a great solution, but it may not work for us. So how can you come up with creative wins for your family that are small and doable? And we call them experiments because we want to encourage that experiment mindset, this idea that if we try it and it doesn't work, okay, well, it was an experiment. So just like when you go to your boss and you say, here's something I want to try, here's how it'll work for you, you can do the same thing with the other people in your life, right? We started chore charts. My kids weren't super psyched about chores, but we used it as a conversation about values. We used it as a conversation about how we're all in this together and how it'll make things better for everybody. That doesn't mean they're excited about it, but it does mean that we had a conversation. This is an experiment. We're going to see how it goes, and we're going to see how we all feel at the end of the week. Are things better? Do we all feel better? Are some of us calmer, right? Do we feel a sense of accomplishment? So there's no perfect experiment, but you have to at least be able to articulate how it could potentially make things better across the different parts of life for you and the people around you. So we don't get to experiment at the expense of someone else. So I will give you an example of an experiment that I tried and show you the thoughts. Okay, so my thought process was, one of our family values is helping those in need, but we're socially distancing. So what can we do that will help those in need, but also live some of our other values like fun, growing responsibility, spending quality time together? And I came up with the idea of getting a foster puppy. We have a senior citizen dog. I thought if we could get a foster puppy, then we would be helping the community because the shelters need foster parents because the shelters are shutting. And it would give us something fun to do. It would give us something to focus on. It would teach the kids some responsibility, and it would be great. Got the dog yesterday, and it's a lot of work. I kind of forgot. It's like how you forget how painful childbirth is. You forget how much energy potty training a puppy requires. And the experiment was kind of like, oh, the kids are having a lot of fun, but I feel more stress. I feel like there's more demands on my time. I don't feel I imagined in my head that it would take my anxiety away from like worrying about the pandemic and refocus on worrying about the dog, which I guess it did a little bit, but it also just raised the worry level because now I'm worrying about two things. So we'll foster the dog. Actually, she's going to get spayed tomorrow and she may not come back, but that's not up to us. But would I foster again? Probably not. It was an interesting experiment, but it's costing me more maybe than what we're getting back because I seem to be doing the lion's share of work. So tried it, learned. We can decide in a week or two whether we want to foster another puppy if this one gets adopted. So that's just an example. Through our work with parents, we've found that they create sort of 6 broad themes of experiment types. And as I go through them, I want to see if they trigger any ideas for you or spark interest. You say, oh, what if I tried this? Or what if I tried that? Or this won't work for me, or definitely not. So as I go through these, if you could think about how you might apply it in your own life, then you can either put it to the Zoom chat or have Roxanne share it in the Zoom chat. And you don't have to have like well thought out, conceptualized ideas. So just, see what you can come up with as we go through this. So the first one is focusing on generating quality time. So knowing that in our regular lives, we've got a million things going on and we're busy all the time, probably. But especially now when we're trying to do work in the same place that we're raising our children and being partners and doing all of the other domains of our life, how can we create small chunks of quality time for a part of our life? So whether it's hiding in a closet to do work for 30 minutes so that you can actually focus on what you're doing, or saying, okay, for the next 30 minutes, we're turning off all technology and we're going to play a board game together, right? What's one little thing that you could do on a daily basis or a weekly basis that would improve all the different parts of your life by giving you greater quality time? And again, the focus is here on a small change, not what, not revamping your whole life so that now you have quality time every second of every day. That's unrealistic. The second one, which I think is particularly apt, even though it was one of our more popular experiment types even before this all started, is letting go. So this would be saying, what responsibilities or things on my to-do list can I either not do or do less well? So really challenging our perfectionism and saying, what can I let go of? Now, don't let go of things that are important for you to keep your job or to keep your kids safe and healthy. But if you're telling yourself that your house has to be perfectly clean, or the meals have to be perfectly prepped, or every email has to be perfectly crafted, or your kids should not be on the iPad at all watching, garbage TV, what can you let go of? What can we say, this is something I am not going to do, or I'm going to do differently, and I'm going to choose to not feel guilty about it. Now, can work on whether we actually don't feel guilty about it, but what could you potentially let go of? The next one is dedicating time, setting aside time to coordinate logistics. So a lot of the parents that we worked with when we were developing these ideas, they discovered that setting aside time on Sunday evening to plan out the following week, who's going to take the kids to soccer, who's going to make the dinners, who's doing the grocery shopping, when are your meetings, which days are you working late, that coordinating the logistics for that was really helpful, because then throughout the week, they knew who was going to do what. Now, who's taking the kids to soccer is sort of an irrelevant question at this moment, but we can still coordinate the logistics of our lives a little bit. So when am I going to be the lead parent while you take important calls? When are you going to be the lead parent? Or how can we stack our schedules? Or how can we, make sure that we can all have lunch together, right? How are you coordinating the logistics of this new reality? The next one is practicing shared values, coming up with a new way to live the values that we identified earlier. So I use the example of the foster puppy as an example of practicing the values of taking care of others. And also the value of having fun, trying something new, growing in our responsibility. And the idea was that it would make things better across the board, not just that it would allow us to care for others, but that we might also have better relationships with each other because we're less focused on getting on each other's nerves all the time. Or maybe my anxiety level would go down because I've got a cute puppy, so I can focus on my work better. Really thinking about how do these experiments build our capacity to be effective and happy in all the different parts of our life. The next one is probably something that we're all struggling with, and I saw a few comments about this already, is how do we build our health? How do we take care of our mind, our body, our spirit during these weird times? So that could look like a lot of different things. And I said this early on, that sometimes building our health might mean giving ourselves permission to watch crappy TV and not feel bad about it because we need that zone out distraction. It could be things like meditating, exercising, yoga. It could be things like, getting a book from the digital library and reading it, taking a bath. And then think even more so, how can I do that in the way that allows me to fulfill my other responsibilities? So can I do a yoga exercise with my kids during our time together? Or can I put my earbuds in and sit outside on the patio and get some nature time while I'm doing a Zoom call. The weather sucks here in Chicago, but maybe for you, I don't know where you all are. So how can I build my health in a way that meets my needs? It may mean separating myself, but it may not. But it could also mean doing things together. And the puppy forces us to go on extra walks. So I think of that as building health too. And these experiments can really be combinations as well. And then lastly, focusing on strengthening our networks of love and support. So when we did this with parents last year, a lot of this was about community activities, physically being in the same space, whether it's going to church or hosting a potluck or having a movie night out on the lawn in their neighborhoods. But what can we do now in this new reality to build those bonds and strengthen the connections? It could be, happy hour with friends or family members, or, setting a schedule of FaceTiming a different family member each day. Any ways that we can build on those social bonds in a way that helps us feel connected to our community, but also has a ripple effect to the other parts of our life. It makes us feel more peaceful. It allows our kids and our family members to feel connected. It helps us feel less isolated, so our concentration at work is better. It could be strengthening work networks and seeing spillover to personal life as well. How can you connect with people that you've been out of touch with to potentially strengthen your career relationships moving forward by using this as an opportunity to connect, saying, I've been thinking about you, how are you, what's going on? So just building those connections more thoughtfully. So what you do is you just come up with an idea for an experiment. What is something you could try that would have ripple effects? So if a couple people would maybe write something that came to their mind, it doesn't have to be well thought out yet, but if we could hear, oh, what if I tried this? And it can be really little. Any thoughts on what we could try, what you might try? So far I've told you my chore chart for the kids, the foster dog, which I may or may not be regretting slightly. Somebody mentioned that they have a neighborhood Zoom party already, or that could be an experiment that some other people might want to try. Family Zoom party on Wednesday nights. Yep, so Zoom's a great way. There's other apps for connecting. What else could you try? So actually some people are connecting more than usual. Family game night. If I tilt the camera, you can see our family game night activities. That was something that we had adopted actually a few months ago because we were finding that people were disagreeing, to put it mildly, about how we should spend our family time. Somebody started a Facebook group called Parenting Under Quarantine. That's Jeremy started that, and it has more than 23,000 members. So I would encourage other people who are listening to go check that out. But also it builds a sense of community. Somebody could try picnics in the park. That's a good one. Or even, on the patio if you have it. Thinking creatively at work, maybe delegating something at work, or taking on a new responsibility at work, or shifting who does what when. Charades, trivia games, family movie nights. These are all really lovely suggestions. And as you do them, ask your kids if they can come up with ideas, if they can see a new way to do it. I love dance parties in the living room. Kids Bop. If your kids listen to Kids Bop music, it's sort of like safe version of pop songs. They have Kids Bop dance videos where you can learn the choreography. So that my daughter was asking for a dance party today. So we might try that tomorrow, build a tent. So these are all great ideas. A lot of them are really focused on the family. We did makeup on mommy too. They're focused on the family domain, but I think what's important is for you to really push yourselves to articulate how this makes things better in the other ways, in the other parts of your life, right? So how does putting makeup on mommy make you a better employee, right? It may not seem obvious at first, but keep looking, right? Keep pushing. My workplace, for instance, asked us to tag creative ways, to post on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, creative ways that we're making work and family work. So I actually posted a picture of me sitting at the computer with my daughter doing my hair behind me, right? So now my daughter's doing my hair, I'm still working, and I'm now contributing to the culture of my workplace that makes it a warm place where we acknowledge families and we help, people sort of recognize that it's okay. So I also have a great workplace. I'm really lucky, but it was a way to get a win-win across multiple parts of life. So really articulating, how will this make each of the different parts of our lives better, and how will we know? How will we be able to tell if this is working or not? So with the foster pup, I feel stressed. I'm monitoring sort of my self-domain, my thoughts and feelings. So I'm looking and saying, am I feeling less stressed, which was the intended outcome of the experiment, or am I feeling more stressed? And at least for the first 2 days, feeling more stressed. So looking at, how is this going to work? How can you make it be a win for you, for your partner, if you have one, for your children, for your workplace, for yourself, your mind, body, spirit. I love all of these great ideas. I hope that you all try them and then connect back with me on Twitter and Instagram or through email. I think my email's on the front slide, and if you don't have it, Roxanne can share it as well. So once you do that, you try to have some concrete outcomes to say, is this working or is it not? And if it feels like it's not working, be ready to try something else, or to tweak it, or to let it go. And, the idea here, as keep coming back to, is being compassionate with ourselves and with each other, to say, okay, we tried this experiment. Here's what worked about it. Here's what different. Kids, what should we try next? What do you think? So I want to share with you briefly some of the things that people tend to learn about themselves and their relationships when they go through this process. And I think that these are even more true now, although I don't have the hard numbers to back that up. People feel like, oh, I have more love and support in my life than I realized. People want to be there for me. They want to help me. I didn't know until until I invited people to help me live my values, that I have this love and support. People also tend to feel like, oh, I didn't fully understand. I didn't know things about the people in my life. I'm surprised to learn new things about the people that I care about when I start to have these conversations, when we start to clarify assumptions and talk about values. They realize that they can build even deeper connections. They realize that they can set more realistic expectations for themselves. I heard a couple different people talk about feeling guilty, right? So how can we manage those expectations that we have of ourselves and others, so that we're still performing and giving where it's needed, but we're also letting ourselves off the hook where it's not? People start to realize that we have more freedom to change our lives than we realize. I think a lot of us feel pretty stuck right now, and I don't think that's unreasonable to feel stuck, but there may be more opportunity for change than what you think. Another big realization for people is that small changes can have a big impact, that you don't need to completely overhaul your life in order to gain from this leadership mentality. And then lastly, and I hope you start to think of yourself this way, is to start to see yourself more as a leader who can be proactive. I think it's a really natural tendency to feel victimized by this situation. This sucks. Why is this happening? Why are we being forced to go through this? And I commiserate, and I have pity parties regularly where I feel sorry for myself and my family and my kids and what they're missing. But how can I instead focus on myself as a leader who can be proactive about living my values, and to see the social distancing, to see the school closure as something that aligns with my values of being part of a community, and to see them in sort of the bigger picture of what we care about, and to see ourselves as leaders. And it's not going to make this situation, probably it's not going to make the situation the best times of our life. Like, we're not going to be like, oh yes, let's keep us trapped in our house with our kids extra. But maybe we'll look back and say, I really rose to this challenge. I really stood for what matters to me. I was a leader in my community and in my family, and I'm proud of myself and I'm proud of my family. So that's aspirational, but even if you just like trade off who cooks breakfast versus who cooks lunch, and that makes life slightly less annoying and stressful, then I'll call that a win as well.